The night of uninvited guests. At 18, I found myself alone in our family home during the beginning of summer. My parents had traveled out of town, a routine occurrence, leaving me to enjoy some solitude. That night, I was deep into binge watching a favorite show on Netflix, simultaneously scrolling through social media on my phone. Around midnight, a sudden knock at the door broke the tranquility. Hesitantly, I paused the TV and approached the door. Through the peephole, two men in matching attire stared back, seemingly waiting for someone to answer. Unnerved, I chose silence, hoping they'd leave. Instead, they called out, seeking my parents by name, a detail I had purposely altered here for privacy. Confused yet cautious, I remained silent, tracking their movements. They conversed briefly and left the porch, disappearing into the darkness without a vehicle, which was peculiar and unsettling. I returned to my show, but the unease lingered. Minutes later, I heard footsteps outside, growing closer. They circled the house, eventually tampering with the back door. Seizing the moment, I grabbed my phone and concealed myself in the garage, frantically calling the police. A loud pop echoed through the house as the back door gave way. Footsteps thundered inside, moving directly upstairs. An eerie silence followed, broken only by the arrival of the police. The intruders were apprehended upstairs, still refusing to reveal their intentions. Despite their capture, the thought of their possible intentions, especially towards my parents, haunted me. The campers' sinister intent. Living in the outskirts of a mid-sized town in Wyoming offers a unique solitude. My modest home, cozily situated on a vast plot of land, was my sanctuary. This unsettling event unfolded 4 years ago during a relentless spring rain. One evening, as I enjoyed the comfort of my home, an unexpected knock at the door startled me. To my surprise, a young man, drenched and distressed, stood there. He claimed to have been camping nearby and requested shelter for the night. His story seemed plausible given the downpour, but a nagging sense of danger held me back. I offered him a phone call for a ride, but he declined and left, disappearing into the rainy night. Hours later, an orange glow from a campfire caught my attention. Peering through the window, I saw the same man beside the fire, holding what appeared to be a rifle. I called the police, reporting his suspicious presence. As I awaited their arrival, I noticed him approaching the house, now aggressively banging on the door. Fearfully, I armed myself and prepared to confront him. In a desperate attempt to deter him, I fired a warning shot which luckily drove him away. The police arrived to discover buried items near the campfire, suggesting the man had premeditated criminal intentions. The incident left me with lingering fears and unanswered questions about his motives. The masked visitor in the dark. After my mother's passing, I decided to move into her small house, partly as a tribute and partly for financial reasons. The house, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, seemed like a peaceful retreat. However, one night, this illusion was shattered. Awoken by the sound of a door closing, I assumed it was my mother returning from work early. But as I lay there, listening to the footsteps pacing around the house, a chilling realization dawned on me. It wasn't her. Gripped by fear, I cautiously explored, only to discover a masked man seated at the dining table, his black attire blending into the shadows. He sat motionless, his gaze fixed on me, emanating a palpable sense of menace. I retreated upstairs, locked myself in my room, and dialed 911. The encounter in rural silence. My life in a rural home was usually uneventful, marked by the occasional interaction with a neighbor or a trip into town. One late fall day, as I was storing tools and equipment in preparation for winter, an unusual sight caught my attention. A man, devoid of any belongings, wandering down the road. After he vanished, I returned to my tasks, dismissing the incident as an oddity. However, that night, a loud thud from my shed jolted me from my dinner. Grabbing my rifle for protection, I ventured outside to investigate. The shed door was inexplicably open, yet nothing seemed out of place inside. As I secured the shed and headed back, an unnerving feeling crept over me. Back inside, I discovered muddy shoe prints leading to the spare bedroom. Confronted by an angry man wielding a shovel, I was forced to defend myself. He eventually fled into the night, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of unease about his possible return. The Airbnb intruder. My first experience using Airbnb turned into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. Driving to a small, seemingly deserted town, I arrived at a cozy-looking house, which contrasted starkly with the empty streets. Inside, I found comfort in the simplicity of the place and soon retired to bed. However, sleep eluded me, and a series of thuds and creaks heightened my unease. The sounds morphed into footsteps, slowly approaching my room. In a split second, the door was forced open, revealing a man with a look of rage in his eyes. After a frantic struggle, I managed to secure the door and call for help. The intruder's desperation to enter my room and his subsequent escape left me deeply disturbed, questioning his motives and the risks of staying in unfamiliar places. Intrusion in the rental house. My peaceful stay at a rental house was disrupted by unexplainable events. The first night, I was awoken by footsteps and a softly closing door. Nothing was amiss, except for the unlocked front door. The following evening, after a thorough check of the house, a large man suddenly slammed the bedroom door shut, then ransacked the living and kitchen areas before fleeing. The police couldn't find him or determine his motives, leaving me with unnerving questions about his presence and what he might have been seeking. The Craigslist stalker. A simple Craigslist transaction turned sinister when I realized the interested buyer was following me. The man, driving an old rusted sedan, seemed to inspect my house from the outside before vanishing into the night. Panicked, I called the police when I saw him lurking in my backyard. He fled, leaving his car behind, which turned out to be clean of any identifying information. The incident left me fearing for my safety and wondering about his intentions. As we close this chapter of spine-chilling tales, remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eerie adventures. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Until next time, keep the lights on and stay curious. Who knows what shadows lurk in the corners of our world?
Flexing ain't discreet about it. Extra read about it. Say you wanna beef about it.
Welcome, fearless adventurers, to a realm shrouded in darkness and mystery. Brace yourselves for an odyssey into the unknown, as we embark on dark descent, a terrifying journey. In this heart-pounding tale, we invite you to join our intrepid team of explorers as they delve into the sinister secrets of a mansion gripped by an ancient curse. As these brave souls step into the abyss, they'll confront their deepest fears and unearth the malevolent forces that have imprisoned the mansion's tortured spirits for centuries. Join us now, as we unlock the secrets of dark descent, a terrifying journey, and expose the horrors that lie hidden in the shadows. Dare you venture where echoes of laughter have faded, and the air thickens with the weight of forgotten joy? Can you decipher the ghostly whispers that beckon from the depths of the unknown? In the labyrinthine catacombs and amidst cursed artifacts, our team faces the descent into madness and the echoes of suffering that linger in the mansion's haunted halls. As we journey through this abyss of fear, stay vigilant. Dark Descent promises a tapestry of terror, mystery, and a battle against the malevolent force that seeks to claim their souls. Stay with us, and witness a story that transcends the boundaries of life and death. This is Dark Descent, a terrifying journey. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, for only the bravest souls shall endure the horrors that await in the next episode. The journey has just begun, and the shadows conceal revelations that will haunt your dreams. Are you ready to face the unknown? Our story begins with our main characters, each with their own unique backgrounds and personalities. First, there's Sarah, a courageous journalist searching for the truth behind the legends. Next, we have Mark, a skeptical yet curious paranormal investigator. Lastly, Emily, a lifelong believer in the supernatural, joins the team with her knowledge of ancient rituals. Together, they journey into the heart of darkness, unaware of the horrors that await them. As our brave team ventures deeper into the unknown, the setting becomes increasingly unsettling. Picture a dilapidated mansion, shrouded in mist, with creaking floorboards and flickering candlelight. The air is thick with an ominous presence, sending shivers down their spines. With each step, the characters face inexplicable events, doors slamming shut, whispering voices from nowhere, and sudden drops in temperature. Shadows lurk in every corner, adding to their growing unease. Suspicion fills the air as they struggle to make sense of the supernatural forces at play. As the night unfolds, tensions rise, and their fears intensify. The characters must band together, using their unique skills and knowledge, to uncover the truth and escape the clutches of evil before it's too late. The mansion reveals its secrets layer by layer. The team encounters cryptic symbols, ancient artifacts, and glimpses into a tragic history that binds the place in darkness. As the clock ticks, they face escalating paranormal phenomena, apparitions, spectral voices, and the ever-looming presence of an unseen malevolence. The climax approaches as the characters stand before the epicenter of the mansion's haunting. They confront the malevolent force, using their combined knowledge and courage to break the curse that binds the tortured souls within. The video builds to a crescendo of suspense, leading to a heart-stopping moment where the characters must make a choice that will determine their fate. As the climactic confrontation unfolds, our characters unearth the shocking truth behind the curse, a truth that transcends the boundaries of life and death. The mansion's dark history is laid bare, and the curse's grip begins to loosen. The aftermath leaves our characters changed, forever marked by the horrors they've faced. But with the curse lifted, the mansion stands silent, and the tortured spirits find a semblance of peace in the quietude of the night. In their quest for answers, our characters stumble upon chambers filled with mystical symbols and remnants of ancient rituals. The air is charged with an otherworldly energy as they decipher the cryptic messages that hint at the dark forces controlling the mansion. As they immerse themselves in the magic of the past, the characters begin to unravel the connections between the cursed rituals and the tortured spirits haunting the mansion. The mansion's haunted halls echo with the faint laughter of children and glimpses of joy that once filled the now desolate rooms. Our characters bear witness to the memories of a happier time, contrasting sharply with the current state of despair. The revelation of the mansion's forgotten joy serves as a poignant reminder of the tragedy that befell its inhabitants, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and lost innocence. As night deepens, the characters become attuned to the ghostly whispers that permeate the mansion. The whispers reveal fragments of the spirit stories, conveying the anguish and yearning that bind them to the earthly realm. Deciphering the messages becomes a race against time, as the characters strive to understand the spirit's unfulfilled desires and the key to setting them free. Beneath the mansion's surface lies a labyrinth of catacombs, a maze of darkness that conceals the most sinister secrets. Our characters descend into the depths, where the walls seem to pulse with malevolence, and the air thickens with the scent of ancient decay. The catacombs become a crucible of terror, testing the characters' resolve as they face malevolent entities that guard the mansion's darkest truths. The mansion harbors cursed artifacts and relics, each carrying a fragment of the curse's power. Our characters must confront these malevolent objects, each possessing a unique horror that reflects the sins of the past. As they face the cursed objects, the characters are forced to confront their deepest fears and the sins that bind them to the unfolding nightmare. As the night wears on, the malevolent force within the mansion plays tricks on their minds. The characters question reality as the walls seem to close in, and the mansion transforms into a labyrinth of insanity. The descent into madness becomes a palpable fear, with each character confronting their own inner demons. Paranoia sets in, and trust among the team begins to fray. In their quest for survival, our characters stumble upon hidden chambers that hold the echoes of suffering. Tortured spirits linger in the shadows, their anguished moans reverberating through the desolate halls. Each room tells a tragic tale of the mansion's dark history. The characters bear witness to the residual pain, and the weight of the suffering becomes an unbearable burden on their souls. Each room tells a tragic tale of the mansion's dark history. The characters bear witness to the residual pain, and the weight of the suffering becomes an unbearable burden on their souls. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, the team unearths hidden clues and cryptic symbols that point to a deeper, more malevolent force at play. The mansion's secrets begin to unravel, revealing a darkness that transcends time itself. With each revelation, the characters draw closer to understanding the origin of the curse that binds the mansion and the tortured souls within. But the more they uncover, the more sinister the truth becomes. As the night approaches its climax, our characters stand before the heart of the mansion, an ancient chamber where the curse's source lies dormant. The air is thick with malevolence, and the characters brace themselves for the final confrontation. In a battle against time, the team must confront the malevolent force head-on. The ancient chamber becomes a battleground of supernatural proportions, testing their resolve and courage in the face of unspeakable horrors. As the climactic confrontation unfolds, the characters unearth the shocking truth behind the curse, a truth that transcends the boundaries of life and death. The mansion's dark history is laid bare, and the curse's grip begins to loosen. The aftermath leaves our characters changed, forever marked by the horrors they've faced. But with the curse lifted, the mansion stands silent, and the tortured spirits find a semblance of peace in the quietude of the night. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing descent into the unknown. Dark Descent, a terrifying journey has unraveled a tale of horror, mystery, and the resilience of the human spirit. Until next time, stay vigilant, for darkness may linger where you least expect it. If you dare to face more horrors and mysteries, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. The journey is far from over. Stay tuned, and remember, the shadows hold secrets that even the bravest souls fear to uncover.
One Christmas, me and my son were at my parents' house celebrating. It was getting late. I told my son, who was about 5 at the time, "Let's get home and get you to bed before Santa goes to our house and has to leave because you're not asleep." We get home and I'm getting our bags out of the car and my son says Mama Santa is in our house. My blood froze. Our front curtains were open to show off our tree. So I asked him, "What did you see?" He said Santa, peeking out the window at us. I took him to my neighbor's house and told them to call the cops if I'm not back in 5 minutes. The doors and windows were all locked and no sign of anybody in the house, while at university my friends and I ran out of booze. Hardly any shops were open this night because it was so late, so the only option was to walk the mile or so to the nearest 24-hour supermarket. Between the supermarket and the dorms that we lived in was just row after row of suburban houses, which all looked the same as we were walking down one road, some people riding horses around it. There were people playing musical instruments and general sounds of a good time going on the horse. As in fire and the lanterns which were dotted about gave it a very old-fashioned feel. Maybe 5 minutes after passing the field, now walking past houses again, one of my friends commented on how weird and out of place that gathering of people had been. My other friend had been thinking exactly the same thing. So curious, we turned around and walked back to find out exactly what was going on. There was nothing there. The people, the horses, they were not there, just more houses, even though we were absolutely certain that we were on the right road as we had simply turned around. We walked up and down the neighboring roads too. We found nothing. We weren't drunk though. We had had some drinks, and so I've got absolutely no idea what happened that night, camping with 2 friends the middle of the night, all 3 of us inside a square tent just filling out chatting. The lights are on one side of the tent wall, begins to cave inward as if there's strong wind or something pushing on the side of the tent. Everyone freaks out, but I assume it's the wind chill out, guys. I proceed to jump up and punch the tent wall, but then I connect with something. A feeling of punching flesh is unmistakable now. I freak out. What or who did I just punched through the tent wall. I eventually convince my friends it's the smartest idea to have a look outside the tent, but it's been 15 minutes, and by the time they agree, there's nothing out. They're working on a school report late at night in my ground-level bedroom. I glance up to look at my reflection in the glass of the window, and then I realize it's not my reflection. Someone else is staring at me through my window, and then they disappear here. I shudder. It still gives me chills when I think about it. I was in my tent, and it was the middle of the night, perhaps 1 a.m. And I had woken up to go eat just like normal. I was about to unzip the tent when I heard a small scratching sound. I paused. It was a slow, deliberate, crunchy digging sound. It was too rhythmic for an animal, so after making sure it wasn't my dad who was sharing the tent, I unipe a corner of the door and peek it out. The moon was just bright enough for me to see a woman squatting right next to our little twan tent, digging at the ground with her bare hands. My dad went and shined a flashlight on her and told her to go back to wherever she had made camp. The woman got up silently, leaving a 4-in-deep hole next to the tent, and started walking away. I went outside, went pee, and got back into my sleeping bag. A few minutes later, I was awoken again by a clattering sound of a person or an animal walking around where we had put our stuff. I looked outside again, and the woman was crouched low, walking around our stuff and looking at things the way a monkey would. My father stepped out of the tent, shined the flashlight on her again, and she faced dirty but clearly not malnourished, staring at his light. He gave up and went back to the tent. Soon we heard her digging again at her little hole, which was literally 6 in and 2 pieces of thin nylon away from my head. I shouted for her to go away, and she ran away in an animalistic fashion and didn't return. I fell back asleep, and in the morning our stuff was scattered. But nothing was missing. My husband and I were out of town on vacation. We were staying at this bed and breakfast in Vermont. It was in a pretty rural area, but very beautiful. The place appeared to be very old, with elderly folks managing it. They were so nice and pleasant. We arrived there about 7 o'clock and were starving. The old man that showed us to our honeymoon site room told us he would make us some supper. We told him he didn't have to, but we didn't fight him too much, since he genuinely seemed like he wanted to, and we really were starving. He made us some red potatoes and chicken fried steak with toast after eating. We sat with him and his wife and talked. We asked questions about the place and how long they had worked there. They told us they owned the joint. They asked us where we were coming from and what the occasion was. They were so nice. In the middle of our conversation, we noticed a man exit the bathroom down the hall, which was visible from the side of the table we were sitting at, and stump a few doors down to his room, or what I assumed it was. He seemed troubled, like he was upset, or maybe on drugs. He was making grunting noises. The elderly couple just smiled, and you could tell they felt very uncomfortable, like they were familiar with this man and were just dealing with him. I wanted to ask about him, but I didn't. I felt like I'd be making it worse and making them more uncomfortable. Later that night, my husband and I were in our room laying in bed talking, when in the room next to ours we heard a very faint voice say, "Not again." It sounded like a man to me, but my husband said to him it sounded like a woman's voice. Then we heard what sounded like a big piece of furniture being moved around the room. A few hours passed and we were asleep when I was shaken awake by my husband. I was startled, and he said he heard somebody gasp in the room next door and make a noise that sounded like they were in some kind of trouble. He said it was not the room that we heard the noise earlier, but the other side of our room. I told him he should call the front desk or the living room and tell whoever would be working there. He did. But very strangely, nobody picked up the phone. He put some clothes on and went down to the front of the building, where we met the elderly couple from, before he was gone for about 10 minutes, and then returned and said nobody was down there. He said he walked into the back kitchen around the outside of the house and never saw anyone. I'd say about 20 minutes after he returned to our room, we heard somebody walking in the hallway. They eventually walked up to our room and then stopped. Thankfully, the door was locked because whoever it was tried opening it. My husband yelled out, occupied, in a stern, annoyed voice. The person at the door then continued walking towards the staircase. We eventually went back to sleep and woke up at around 9 a.m. We packed up our stuff and went down to the front, expecting to see the elderly couple, but what we found instead was very troubling. We walked into the back kitchen once again, and laying in the sink were white rags that looked Like they had blood on them, we continued to look around, and eventually, my husband opened a closet and found AAM was very thick looking red water at that point. I freaked out. I knew something was very wrong. We walked around the whole place and never saw anyone again. Eventually, we left some money on the back kitchen counter and a note and left. The rest of our vacation was normal, I guess could say, but when we hit our next stop, we called the police and told them that they should check out that bed and breakfast. They told us they would, but we never got a call back. We never found out what happened until we got home a few days after we arrived at our house. Police were at our door questioning us about our stay at that bed and breakfast. We were told that the elderly couple were brutally murdered and their bodies were dismembered. Remembered, the woman was found in the room next to ours, chopped up, and her husband was found in the room on the other side. His body had been dragged to the bathroom and his body had been cut up in the bathtub. I was sick upon hearing this. We had to go take a polygraph test. But our story and willingness to cooperate excluded us from possible suspects. Months passed, and I would often inquire about it and call the police asking if they had found who did it. Eventually, they had. We learned that It was April of 2015. My girlfriends and my little brother, who was 9 years old, had gone to a small nearby movie theater on a Wednesday night to see the horror movie It Follows. We usually went late on weekends to get the whole theater to ourselves, plus I had off on Thursdays that semester when we entered the theater. At first it seemed like we were the only ones inside, but then my little brother pointed somebody out. It was a man in a dark gray hoodie sitting in the top left corner. See, in the theater it was a little sketchy, but nobody would really give it a second thought. We picked upper middle row seats with a railing in front so we could put our feet up, and we each sat with an empty seat between us for more room. I know that sounds weird to do with my girlfriend with me, but having my brother there made it a different story. I was sitting the closest to the edge and therefore the closest to the one other guy in the room besides us. Within 5 minutes, the previews were over and the movie was starting. The lights in the theater dimmed to darkness, and the only light now was the light projecting from the screen. My little brother took out his bag of candies. He snuck in and started to eat them obnoxiously loud about 5 minutes into the movie over my brother's loud candy wrapper noises, which we told him to stop for the record. I thought I heard a pretty loud sound come from above and behind us. I waited a few seconds to sneak a glance behind us and saw that the guy that was sitting in the top corner had moved down a row, which was odd. But again, I didn't give him more than a second thought. Another 5 minutes later, when the movie was already starting to get interesting, I heard something from behind us again. I turned when I thought it wouldn't be too obvious, and again, the guy was a whole row closer to us. I leaned to my girlfriend and said, while chuckling, "Don't look," but that guy keeps moving closer to the screen. She shrugged her shoulders and didn't even show interest in checking. I told myself if he did it again, then I would have a problem and manage to get back into the movie, I'd say, another 5 minutes later without even hearing anything this time. I just turned around out of curiosity and saw the man a whole row closer, but this time, he wasn't at the last seat of the row anymore. He was moved further down the row closer to us now. He was only 3 rows behind us. Inodi's my girlfriend. Then she turned around, then she looked at me and gave me a confused, concerned kind of look. She asked me if we should move, and I said definitely. Not at this point. I wasn't able to pay attention to the movie anymore. Even though I was facing the screen, I felt like the man's gaze was hitting me in the back of the head. I told myself if he moves closer, I would turn around and firmly ask him what he was doing, but then I also thought, what if I'm looking too much into this? What if he's just a normal guy who happens to keep switching seats for a better view? Once more I turned around, and the man was only 2 rows away from us now, closer to the center of the row, or rather directly behind us, and his head was just completely down, looking at his lap. I didn't even bother to check what he was looking at. He could have been looking at nothing. I literally opened my mouth ready to say something, but I was just too much of a coward. I was only 16 last year and pretty skinny. My little brother got up during a slow part of the movie to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, I turned. to see if the man had gotten closer again this time, actually ready to say something, but I was shocked to see nobody behind us. It was completely empty, I told my girlfriend, and she said, "Good," but then I stood up in pure fear, thinking of my little brother telling my girlfriend to wait there and running out of the room and into the empty theater halls. I saw the man in the gray hoodie entering the men's bathroom down the hall, fearing for my little brother's safety. I ran down the hall toward the bathroom, opened the door, and saw the man literally on his knees peeking under the 2 stall doors. Then he looked at me, and at the same time I heard my little brother call me from down the hall. I saw him waving me over in confusion. I ran to him, got my girlfriend out of the movie room, and we went to the front desk. The teamwork in the front ticket stand called the police showed us, and the cops, the video footage of the man walking down the hall, and then we filed the police report. I'm just so grateful that my brother went to a different bathroom down the opposite direction of the hall, because if he had been in there, even with my showing up to save him, I have no idea what would have happened. It's been over a year now, and the man was never identified back in 2008. Cloverfield was one of the biggest movies of the year, and I desperately wanted to see it. Most of my friends had already gone to see it, which upset me given that I didn't want to be seen going to the movie theater alone. However, I didn't have work or school on Thursdays, so on Wednesday night I figured I could get away with going alone to one of the small theaters nearby with a screening of the film at 9:30 since I knew it would be quiet. Well, I showed up, bought a ticket, and immediately realized the entire building was dead. I entered the theater, and much to my surprise, there was not a single person in there. There were 2 large sections of seats in the theater. I sat in the bottom row of the upper section, which was seated just behind a tiny wall during the quiet parts of the movie, which were very few. I kept thinking that I was hearing something coming from behind me. It was almost like I was hearing a voice as someone there. Nothing. I felt like the sounds were just getting louder and closer, but I kept turning around and didn't see anyone. I felt like I was losing my mind. Eventually, the sound became so loud that it was evident it was a crazed whispering. I was about to nope the underscore out of there. But when I got up and took one last look behind me, a figure popped up quickly from behind the seats just to rose up for me, arms flat to their sides and just facing me like a stiff statue. I ran like there was no tomorrow back to the lobby, where I saw nobody. Not a single employee. I kept running to the car, took a few seconds to catch my breath once inside, and drove back home. I tried calling the theater that same night. I never got anyone to answer. I didn't bother the next day, and I just tried to let it go. It still freaks me out beyond imagination. To this day, one of my first jobs was working on a movie theater in Huntington on Long Island. It was an okay gig for a 16-year-old dealing with the general public en masse. You'll always run into creeps. However, there was one creep and one really weird situation that I still have nightmares about. It was a Monday, like 11 o'clock at night, and the last 2 playing movies were finishing up, which was earlier than usual. On weeknights, I would usually be out of there by midnight during the summer. Anyway, I was the only one working besides Kathy, the lady behind the popcorn counter, and was closing up. I was sitting on the carpeted steps next to my ticket podium on my phone when Kathy yelled over to me to sweep the floor. She told me she was heading out and would be back within the hour to close up. I hurried up with the sweeping and sat back down to get back to playing a Tetris-like game on my flip phone. I was left alone a lot like this, and this was the one time during my shifts that I feared something such as a late-night robbery might easily take place. Suddenly, I heard the front door to the theater pole open with force. I stared down at the doorway to the lobby, which blocked the actual entrance section, waiting for someone to walk through and hoping it would be Kathy. After all, she would have locked the doors anyway at this hour. I called out Kathy's name, and suddenly, an upper middle-aged man with a big brown faded jacket came wandering in, immediately locking his eyes onto mine. I told them we were closing up and he had to leave. He looked at me with a sort of intimidating Vincent Pastore kind of a look on his face. He mumbled his words in his response, but I could make out his phrase to be, "Is Kathy here?" I shook my head no, and he mumbled, "I'm just going to go sit down over there for a while." I was very against confrontations with other people, so my heart was racing, and I lacked the confidence to order him to leave. I sat back down on the step and pretended to be absorbed in my phone when really I was texting Kathy telling her there was someone weird here for her. But with the old flip phones, text took forever to send and even longer for people to check by the time the text was sent. I noticed the man now across the room sitting on a bench was literally watching me. I wanted to show him that I was annoyed by this, so I simply got up, walked up the 3 carpeted stairs and sat down on the bench in front of a wall that would block my view from him. Stupid old me didn't figure this would allow him to do whatever he wanted, not being within my vision. Within minutes, I realized this was dumb and went back to sitting on the step. Only now, the man was gone. Kathy returned around the same time that the last of the moviegoers were leaving. I told her about the guy, and she said she left the door unlocked by mistake. I spent about 10 minutes sweeping up in some of the auditorium rooms before my shift was officially over. Kathy wanted me to do one more favor before leaving: bring the mop bucket and broom down into the storage den. I did as she asked. Opened the door in the lobby which leads to the storage area, walked down the half-light of concrete stairs with a mop, broom, and bucket, and stopped behind one of the boilers. I could see as clear as day an arm tucked away in the corner. It was the man, and he was very clearly trying to hide. I pretended like I didn't notice and walked back up the stairs. I locked the door behind me and ransacked Kathy. She checked the camera footage first, and this is where things got disturbing. Within the period of time that I was hiding from the man, the surveillance cameras caught him getting up and leaving the theater. Kathy seemed surprised and declared, "That's my ex-husband." I felt like my heart was starting to drop that she said this, and I was starting to put things together. I assured her there was in fact somebody down there. She took out her cell phone and dialed, not for 911, for her ex-husband. As she left the building, I followed her, afraid to stay in the theater alone. Kathy suddenly started to panic as it seemed her ex-husband hung up the phone on her. She then called the cops, and what she explained to them shocked and disturbed me. When she hung up the phone, she was in a panic and she tugged me away from the building. It turned out her ex-husband arrived to the theater to get her out of there because he had apparently run into some trouble with a guy he knew who threatened to kill Kathy. For whatever messed up reason, the cop cars pulled up into the parking lot with their sirens blaring. Minutes later, they came out with some old Italian mobster-looking guy in cuffs. Kathy never showed up for work after that, and I was never able to get the full backstory out from anyone. I was the coolest guy at the theater for a while since I witnessed all this. I just really wish I got the full story though, because it really interested me. I never saw Kathy, her ex-husband, or that random guy who potentially almost killed me had I approached him ever again. Welcome to the Nightmare Realm, your ultimate destination for spine-chilling horror stories. If you crave tales that will keep you up at night and send shivers down your spine, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share our scary stories with your bravest friends, and hit the like button to show your love for horror. Join us as we explore the darkest corners of the imagination in the Nightmare Realm. Subscribe now and become part of our horror-loving community. In the year 2014, I frequently used the app Uber because I wasn't able to drive for 12 months due to some DUI charges. Just a stupid mistake. Overall, there's this nightclub bar in my town that I would sometimes go to on the weekends with my friends. Sometimes I would get a ride home with a designated driver if we had one, and sometimes we would catch an Uber this night. I wasn't feeling too great, so I left a little early. It was somewhere between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning. It was way too cold to walk home, so I called for an Uber. A guy nearby named Alex pops up, and I gotta be honest, he was a little creepy looking. He was older, didn't really smile in his picture, and he had a grayish goatee with a black beanie cap on. He was only 2 miles away, so I didn't really care. It said he had a Chevy Malibu, which sounded nice, so I requested he come pick me up. I waited on the bench outside the club next to the bouncer, who stood still like a statue, hands folded together. About 5 minutes later, a silver, 2003 or something, Chevy Malibu pulled up in front of the club. I stood up a bit, disappointed. It was such an old, ratty-looking car. The guy didn't call me over or honk or anything. He just waited by the curb. So I got up and entered the back seat of the car. Right away, things got uncomfortable. He didn't say hello. He didn't shake my hands. He didn't even turn his head to look at me. All he said was in a very quiet voice, "Where are you headed to?" which I replied with my address. We began moving down Main Street, but in the wrong direction of my house. I told him this, and he turned left at the next intersection. Now we were moving away from the main roads and down the quieter residential areas. He didn't put my address into his phone, so I felt really strange. I didn't know if he was expecting me to direct him or not. I ended up putting my address into my own phone so he could listen. When the GPS said turn left down the next street, he completely missed it. I made a confused hand gesture. He noticed it and said, "I just got to make a quick stop. Don't worry. I'll give you a discount," even though I was drunk. I still knew something bad was going on. Then that's when I noticed the handgun sticking out from his middle glove box next to him. By now, I was trying to figure out how to get out of this car at the next red light. I tried the door handle very quietly, but it wouldn't open. I saw that the child lock was on, and from this point forward, my heart was racing. The man was driving as far out of the direction of my house. We must have been 2 towns over by now. I was getting desperate. I couldn't call the cops because I didn't know what this guy might do. I figured my best option would be attempting to flick the trial block switch next to him by the front seats. I had to somehow slide over to the opposite side of the back seat behind him without him noticing. This was one of the most tense moments of my life. I lost my sight on his head through the rear-view mirror, making sure he wasn't looking. I very casually slid behind him. Thankfully, he didn't notice. Now came the scariest part. I had to reach for the button up front at the next red light before he could do anything. Each light we passed, I felt more and more tension build up as I was waiting for one of them to turn yellow, and eventually one finally did. He slowed the car at an intersection that would usually be busy during daylight hours. It was a perfect escape point. The car came to a stop. I knew this light wasn't very long, so I had to be quick. A car was stopped at the opposite side of the intersection, which made me feel a little better. With all my courage, I reached my hand up to the lit-up child lock button, and I must have startled him because he jumped 2 inches out from the seat. He screamed at me, and as I feared he would, he went for the gun right next to him. I was able to open the door and flee to the nearby Cadillac Escalade, where I banged on their windows asking for help. They drove off completely, avoiding me. But it didn't matter because the man in his Chevy Malibu was already gone down the block. I ran into a nearby grocery store that was open 24 hours, where I called the taxi this time. This was a very sobering experience because I don't remember being drunk at all in that store or during the taxi ride home. I reported the driver to Uber, who said they would escalate the situation to the authorities. It wasn't until a whole week later that an officer finally showed up at my front door for some questioning, and that was the end of that. I have no idea what became of that guy, but I've never used an Uber since. As a former Uber driver, I've dealt with a whole bunch of unpleasant characters, from the drunken groups of friends on Saturday nights to the people who pretend to be handicapped to get free rides. But every so often you may pick up somebody who can just be classified as a straight-up creep. I've picked up a few of these guys, but never one quite as bad as a guy named Tom. It was Friday night in December, one of the coldest nights of the year. I had nothing to do, so I figured I'd do some late-night pickups. This was 2 years ago. I was 18 and had a new Honda Accord. My parents kind of spoiled me a bit. I was a very skinny 18-year-old, though. That's why my dad told me to always keep a blade in my car, because you never know what kind of nuts are getting into the car. A guy named Tom popped up a couple miles away by a major shopping area. I responded to his request and started. That was within just 5 miles. There was still 5 to go. By the 6-mile mark, things started getting uneasy in there. I was afraid to look into the rearview mirror because I was so sure that he was staring at me. I took a quick half-second glance, and so I was right. He was, in fact, staring at me. My body forced my foot down heavier on the gas. I wanted this ride to be over sooner. By the 8-mile mark, I started to realize we were in the middle of nowhere. We were on basically a deserted street, with woods on either side and occasional buildings. I was growing suspicious now as to where this address he told me actually was. So, while driving, I dragged my finger across my phone to slide the map in the direction of the address. It seemed to lead to a dead-end street with no surrounding streets nearby. Driving in that direction, I pulled up in front of the shopping center where I saw a group of teenagers hanging out. It looked like trouble. I hoped this Tom guy wasn't part of this group. A bunch of them looked at me in my car as I slowly passed. Eventually, I just hit the gas and went further into the parking lot of the shopping center, wanting to get away from this group. I did 2 laps around the whole parking lot until I finally noticed through my left mirror somebody approaching my car from behind. I rolled down my window and called out Tom, and he called back, "Yes." I told him to hop in. I had to repeat myself 3 times, and given that all I was saying was hop in very clearly made the situation very weird from the start, the 4th time he finally understood me and walked slowly around the back, getting into the seat right behind me. Usually the people I picked up would sit diagonally from me, which is what I preferred when people sat right behind me. It just made me a little paranoid. Sometimes, especially when the person seemed kind of creepy. This guy was old. He had to be in his upper 40s, whereto I asked him. He told me an address which I entered into my phone by his voice. I could tell he was a very heavy smoker, come to think of it. My car was starting to smell like cigarettes. To the address he gave me was 10 miles away, which was fine since in men I'd be making more money. I tried making small talk initially, which didn't work out too well, like if I would ask him a yes or no question. Sometimes you just mumble, and any other questions led to dry responses. I stopped talking when he completely ignored one of my questions. That was within just 5 miles. There was still 5 to go by the 6-mile mark. Things started getting uneasy in there. I was afraid to look into the rearview mirror because I was so sure that he was staring at me. I took a quick half-second glance, and so I was right. He was in fact staring at me. My body forced my foot down heavier on the gas. I wanted this ride to be over sooner. By the 8-mile mark, I started to realize we were in the middle of nowhere. We were on basically a deserted street with woods on either side and occasional buildings. I was growing suspicious now as to where this address he told me actually was, so while driving, I dragged my finger across my phone to slide the map in the direction of the address. It seemed to lead to a dead-end street with no surrounding streets nearby. I was getting more and more nervous with each passing minute now. I shot a glance back up again at the mirror, and he was still watching me. I finally summoned up the courage to ask him if the address he gave me was of his house. There was silence for a few moments, and I thought he was once again going to ignore me or possibly didn't hear me. But 5 seconds later, he finally answered yes. There was less than a mile left in the drive now, still surrounded by nothing but woods with the occasional empty-looking building. I was approaching the dead-end street that the address he gave me resided on, hoping some houses would come into sight as the street came up. I slowed down so I could get a good look of it, but nothing could be seen, just pitch blackness. I could only imagine why he wanted to get me out here alone so far away from anybody or anything. I casually kept driving, pretending like I missed it, hoping he wouldn't notice, but he did. Instantly, he hopped out of his seat and yelled at me to turn around. Honestly, I felt like my life was on the line, so I apologized and did a quick 3-point turn as I was reappropriation to see if licked a blade open and held it tight in my right hands. ready to use it. I turned down the dead-end road with my headlights now displaying just what I thought I would see: nothing but trees on either side. I made it to the end of the road. Not a single house or building on the road. I just knew something was about to go down. I was just trying to physically and mentally prepare myself for it. Suddenly, he said in as soft as a voice as he probably could, "Thanks for the ride." I wasn't even thinking about money at this point. He opened his door, but before stepping out, he said, "Could you get out of the car for a second? I need help carrying my bag." I have a bad back, but he didn't have a bag. I knew he didn't come in with one. I replied, yeah, sure, let yourself out and I'll help you in a sec. The shakiness and my voice was too obvious what happened next. I never imagined what have happened all. Of a sudden, I felt pressure on my neck. It took me at least a second before I could realize he was choking me from the back seat. Immediately, I drilled the blade into his left arm and he screamed in pain, releasing his grip on my neck. He fell out of the car and onto the street, and I took that opportunity to turn the car around and practically floor it down the street until I returned to a busy road. I actually didn't end up calling the cops. I was just too scared to do anything but drive home, and by the time I got home, I just wanted to go to sleep and forget about it. Needless to say, I resigned from my Uber driving days after this incident. You venture into the depths of the nightmare realm, where each story weaves a web of terror and intrigue. If you dare to explore the uncharted territories of fear, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your subscription is the key that unlocks the gates to our ghastly world of horror. Don't just peer into the abyss. Leave a like if our tales make your heart race and your spine tingle. Your likes are the echoes in our shadowy halls, urging us to unveil more secrets from the darkest corners of the mind. Share our videos with those who crave the thrill of the night or seek to challenge their own fears. Every share casts our net of nightmares wider, ensnaring more souls into our realm of the macabre. In Nightmare Realm, every subscribe, like, and share opens another door to a world where your deepest fears come to life. So, are you brave enough to join our Legion of the Night? Subscribe, like, and share if you dare. When I was 14 years old, I lived with my mom, dad, 2 brothers, and my sister in a rural town in Florida. Overall, I miss living in Florida, but the one thing I don't miss was the constant rain on one particular stormy Saturday night where the thunder was so loud it shook the whole house. Me and my 2 brothers had nothing to do. My sister was out at a friend's house, and my 2 brothers decided to play some video games to pass the time. It was only 8 o'clock after all. I remember we were playing some weird PS2 game where all the WWE wrestlers were driving cars and shooting at each other. I don't remember the name, but I remember the exact moment the power went out. I was about to kill my brother in the game when the room went completely dark. The sound of something popping from outside that goes into the room, we assumed a fuse had blown outside on one of the power lines. We went to call for our dad, who was already getting his rain jacket on to go outside and check our house. Has to fuse boxes, one outside attached to the telephone pole on our lawn, and one inside. He asked me to go outside with him to aim a flashlight at the fuse box. When we were outside, he opened up the fuse box and began flicking around the different switches, hoping to reset something. He tried every switch, but the power didn't seem to come back on. He told me to wait there and to keep flicking switches while he went inside to do the same thing with the indoor fuse box. The rain was coming down hard. I just wanted to go inside as soon as possible as I had the flashlight in my hand aimed into the fuse box, even through the sound of rain pounding down on the grounds. I thought I heard something come from the woods behind her house, like a giant log cracking. I aimed the flashlight into the woods, and for maybe half a second I thought I saw an arm reaching around from behind a tree. But as soon as the light exposed it, the arm pulled away. Behind the tree, I shut the fuse box, ran up the front patio, and into the house. I ran to my dad, who was tampering with the switches inside the fuse box in the closet. He entertained my claim, but he didn't seem to take what I said very seriously. He followed me outside around back where I aimed the flashlight into the woods, the same spot I saw the arm my dad took the flashlight from me, and made his way into the woods. I stayed by the back patio in total darkness. Pretty soon, my dad went so deep into the woods that I couldn't see the flashlight anymore, growing nervous. I inched my way closer to the woods, repeatedly calling out for my dad until I found myself walking into the woods. It was hard to even hear myself think over the sound of rain pouring down on the leaves above, but I did suddenly hear footsteps not too far away. Once again, I called out for my dad, and I heard him answer. This made me panic, why you may be wondering, because my dad's voice came from a completely different direction than the footsteps. I ran in the direction of my dad's voice, and eventually found him walking back to the house out of breath. I barely managed to tell him about the footsteps over in the other direction he told me to go back inside, and he'll continue to look around, and so I went inside and locked the door. My brothers and my mom all waited by the back door, expecting to see him come out of the woods any second. Eventually, we heard someone at the front door trying to open the locked door. I went over expecting it to be my dad, but my mom stopped me and looked through the peephole. Then she screamed. She ushered me away from the door and told all of us to go upstairs. And at that same moment, my dad came back into the house through the back door. I didn't see the rest of what happened, but I heard my dad yelling at someone outside when he came back in. He told all of us he saw someone running. It's woods. I knew he was taking this seriously. Now we thought it would end there, but the next morning we found that the basement window had been smashed and there were muddy footprints all over the basement carpet. A large wad of cash that was sitting on the basement bar was stolen, along with a few antique decorations that held some value. The scary part was that the muddy footsteps went up the stairs but stopped there. Our basement door had a very heavy-duty lock, which may be the only thing that stopped this man from exploring the rest of our house, possibly even our bedrooms. It's been a pretty rough couple of nights over here. In Midwest flood, warnings are replaced with thunderstorm. Thunderstorm watches are followed up by tornado warnings, and even sirens add a nice touch to this surreal nightly experience. I used to enjoy a good thunderstorm. You get yourself comfortable on a couch, grab an extra pillow with a blanket, cuddle up, and enjoy the show of grace and lights. Lightning bolts ripping through the sky, illuminating clouds, houses and tree lines, the sound wave coming with a tad of delay, shaking the window frames and sending a strange tangle free. Your body nature is a powerful force, and it was majestic to see it in action until tonight. The forecast was promising a late-night thunderstorm, so I was caught by surprise when I started seeing flashes outside around midnight since I wasn't prepared for it. I tried to quickly finish up The Orange is the New Black episode and get myself to the couch. When I got my headphones off, I realized why the flashes seemed so odd. At first, there was no sound to follow them. I mean, if the lightning is in the clouds or a pretty far away, then yeah, I guess the sound could be missing. But the flashes seemed so close, I decided to check out the sky of the kitchen window. There's a pair of large glass panels that give you a good wide-angle view to the outside to keep my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I stayed away from flipping the switches on and traveled through the house, relying on my memory, the moonless. Darkness of outside gives you that eerie feeling even if you are inside of the safe walls of your house, but those are just the feelings, nothing else. If it wasn't for the glass, the pitch-black darkness of both sides made me feel like the safe walls surrounding me no longer exists, and that feel of safety was slowly crawling away. But the walls did shatter when I glanced up high into the sky, and my eyes met the twinkly stars staring back at me. There were no clouds, there was no thunderstorm with lightning now. There wasn't, but the next flash, right from the other side of the window pane, did reveal that there was someone 5 feet away from me, and nothing but a thin glass sheet was separating us apart in the year 2009. I was spending a weekend with my uncle on his ranch when my parents were renovating the new house we had just bought. It was my second. Night there, a Saturday, and it happened to be during one of the biggest thunderstorms of the year. I'd say there were at least 3 crashes of thunder and lightning per minute, and we were in the heart of the storm because the thunder would crash not even a second after the lightning. I always enjoyed listening to storms while laying in bed, so I stayed up a little later watching TV, just enjoying the ambience after the movie I was watching finally ended. I turned off the TV and tried to fall asleep as I heard the lightning strike from outside. I could have sworn I heard some kind of metallic thud coming from outside at the same time. I didn't pay it too much mind. 20 seconds later, I could have sworn I heard it again, a very distinct metallic thud coming from outside to match the timing of the lightning. I really don't mean to make this sound like a cliche horror story, but my uncle really is a kind of creepy guy, and I was never close with him even remotely. So for that reason, I didn't feel right going to wake him up. I just tried to forget about it now. I was getting concerned. What the hell could that be? After the 3rd time, I finally got out of bed and walked over to the window of the guest bedroom. The water pouring down on the window made it extra hard to see what was out there in the dark fields. A flash of lightning momentarily lit up the property, but I couldn't see anything. However, once again, the sound of a metal hit accompanied it. The sound was so close now, it sounded like it was coming from the left of the window at a blind spot. I was going to do something I knew my uncle wouldn't be happy about. It would be a bit messy, but I was going to open the window and peer outside to see if I could see what the sound was. I unhooked the window lock and slid it up, and immediately the storm blew drops of rain into the room and onto me. I stuck my head out the window and looked to the left, and at that very moment, lightning lit up the property once again, and I could see a person dressed in all black crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air. And before the sky went dark, I caught the briefest glimpse of what the sound was coming from. The person was bashing at the basement door lock. I pulled my head in and quietly shut the window, making sure to lock it. I was in a panic. I feared he might have seen or heard me. I ran back to bed and pretended to be asleep, facing away from the window. Lightning crashed once again, but this time there was no metallic thud. My heart must have dropped as I realized this. I just stayed put in bed for the longest time, hoping whoever was out there would go away after maybe 3 more lightning crashes without any thuds accompanying them. I thought it would be safe to go tell my uncle. I turned to face the window and screamed. There was a figure clear as day standing at the window looking in at me. I screamed as loud as I could and ran straight to my uncle's room. He went outside with his hunting rifle with nothing on but his pajamas, not even socks. He ran around the entire property yelling like a madman, but didn't find anyone. The next morning, we were able to better see the marks on the basement door lock. It was almost bashed open. Maybe 3 or 4 more good hits would have done it, according to my uncle. He was proud of me for picking up on it. Luckily, I was out of there that same day. My uncle hasn't told us of any incident since, so I think he's been okay. Not that we talked to him much at all. I'm grateful I stayed up a little later that night watching that movie, because I may have just stopped a robbery or possibly much worse. Welcome to the Nightmare Realm, your ultimate destination for spine-chilling horror stories. If you crave tales that will keep you up at night and send shivers down your spine, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share our scary stories with your bravest friends, and hit the like button to show your love for horror. Join us as we explore the darkest corners of the imagination in the Nightmare Realm. Subscribe now and become part of our horror-loving community.